I lived below Mrs. Aldric for 4 years. Every evening at 9:47, she walked the same route through her apartment. Kitchen to living room to bathroom, bathroom to bedroom. I knew the sound of her slippers better than I knew my own heartbeat. 3 weeks ago, the footsteps stopped. Last night, something completed the route anyway. When it reached the bedroom position, directly above my bed, it knocked 3 times, then waited for me to move. The building was old enough that you learned your neighbors by sound before you learned their faces. I moved into 3C in early spring 4 years ago. The walls were thin, the way old buildings are, not badly built, just settled, compressed by decades into something that carried noise like water through pipes. You heard everything. The couple in 3A arguing about money, the student in 3B and his 3 songs, the elevator cables at odd hours, and above me in 4C, Mrs. Aldric. I never learned her first name. She was simply Mrs. Aldric. Late 60s, small, white hair pinned back, the kind of person who held the elevator door for anyone she heard coming. She smiled like it cost her nothing. Her routine was so consistent it became part of mine. 9:47 p.m., footsteps from the kitchen toward the living room. Slow, the faint drag of slippers on old parquet. 9:52, the bathroom. Water running briefly, cabinet opening, closing. 9:58, the bedroom. Footsteps stopping, the specific creak of weight settling onto the bed frame above my own. 4 years of that. I didn't realize how much I depended on it until the evening it didn't happen. Kitchen table, laptop, Tuesday in November. I noticed the silence above me the way you notice when a sound you forgot was there suddenly stops. Not the silence of someone moving quietly, the total silence of a space with no one in it. I checked the time. 10:04. She'd gone out, gone to bed early, changed her routine for one evening after 4 years, which she was allowed to do. I went to bed. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to a sound from above, not footsteps. A slow, even knocking. 3 beats, nothing. 3 beats again. I lay completely still. The knocking didn't repeat. I counted to 60, then 2 minutes. Pipes, I told myself. I turned over and fell back asleep the way you do when you're more exhausted than frightened. In the morning, I'd almost forgotten it. Mrs. Aldric's door on the way downstairs. Closed. No sounds from inside. The small doormat she kept outside, faded green, leaf pattern, was slightly askew, pushed to one side like someone had caught it with their foot going past in a hurry. I noticed it and kept walking. At work, I thought about it twice. Dismissed it twice. Told myself I was the kind of person who invents patterns. That evening, home, dinner, the specific low-level attention of someone who doesn't want to admit they're listening for something specific. 9:47. Nothing. 9:52. Nothing. 9:58. Nothing. By 10:30, I was standing in my kitchen, not reading the book in my hand, deciding whether it was reasonable to knock on a neighbor's door at this hour to ask if she was all right. We weren't close. We nodded in the elevator. She had once left a note about a package that arrived while I was out. That was the full extent of 2 years of proximity. Knocking at 10:30 because her routine had changed for one night was the behavior of someone who needed to get out more. I went to bed. 3:06 a.m. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Same rhythm, same interval, directly above where I was sleeping. I turned on the bedside lamp and sat up. The sound stopped immediately. Ceiling completely still. I sat in the yellow lamplight for 20 minutes before I turned it off. In the morning, I checked her doormat. Moved again. Further, almost to the opposite wall. Nobody had touched it. Nobody in this building moved at that hour. I would have heard. I knocked on her door on the 3rd evening, 7 p.m. I had an excuse ready, a noise complaint from 3A. Did she hear it too? Something casual, something that didn't sound like checking whether she was still alive. 2 knocks. Nothing. I pressed my ear close to the door, not touching it, just close. Silence. No television, no radio, no movement at all. I left. Lobby. Mr. Hartog from 2B, the man who knew everything about the building while appearing to notice nothing. Had he seen Mrs. Aldric recently? He thought about it. Last week, coming in with groceries, Tuesday, I think. Tuesday was 10 days ago. Back in my apartment, I stood looking at the ceiling. The plaster had a hairline crack running from the window toward the center of the room. I'd looked at it so many times it had become part of the wallpaper. Now it seemed to end directly above where I was standing. At exactly 9:47, I heard a sound. Not footsteps. Something being dragged, slowly, across the length of the room above me. Kitchen to living room. The same route. Wrong sound. Not slippers on parquet, something heavier. Something that moved in increments. A pull, a stop, a pull. Like it needed to gather itself between each movement. A wet, deliberate sound with weight to it. It stopped at the position where she always stopped. Then the 3 knocks, right above my head. I was standing directly beneath them. I had not moved. I stood there after the sound stopped and noticed my hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, exactly. From the specific feeling of understanding something you were hoping you wouldn't. I called the building manager the next morning. Measured, calm. Hadn't seen my upstairs neighbor in over a week. Couldn't hear her usual movements. Wanted to make sure she hadn't had a fall. He said he'd send the super. I went to work. Spent the day with half my attention on my phone. 2:14 p.m. He called back. Empty. Not vacant empty. Furniture there, photographs on the walls. Her things exactly where they should be, but no Mrs. Aldric. No signs of struggle, no signs of illness. Her bed was made, her dishes were clean. Her reading glasses were folded on the kitchen table beside a half-finished cup of tea that had been sitting long enough to leave a ring on the wood. The kind of ring that takes days. People leave, the manager said. Older tenants go to stay with family. No legal obligation to notify the building. I agreed and hung up. Then I sat and thought about the timing. The sounds had started the same night her footsteps stopped. The same evening. Not a week later, not after a few days, immediately. As if whatever was making them had been waiting. As if it had known before I did that she wasn't coming back. That evening I stood in my apartment and listened. 9:47. Silence. Then 9:52. The dragging started. Same route, same duration, same pause at the living room position. Then from directly above me, very quiet, 1 knock. Not 3, 1. I waited for a second. It didn't come. I started recording. Phone on the kitchen counter at 9:30, voice memo running. I sat on the couch. I didn't want to be standing directly beneath it when it started. That felt important in a way I couldn't explain. 9:47. The dragging began. Hearing it clearly, not half asleep, not through the fog of almost waking, was different. Wrong. It was too slow for a person walking, too regular, each movement identical to the one before, like something without the ability to vary its pace. The interval between each pull was the same every time, patient in a way that living things aren't. 11 minutes. Living room position. 1 knock. Silence. 3 a.m. 3 knocks in the bedroom. I woke. Lay still. They didn't repeat. Morning. I played back the recording. The dragging. Clear. Unmistakable. Then I heard what I'd missed in real time. Beneath the dragging, under it. Quieter. A soft, even rhythm. Breathing. Not mine. My phone had been across the room. Whatever was making that sound was directly above the microphone. I sat with the phone for a long time. Then I checked the recording length. Started it at 9:31. The file was 4 hours and 12 minutes long. I had been awake for the first 40 minutes. I fast-forwarded through the rest. 3 hours and 30 minutes of silence above me. Then, at 1:58 a.m., 13 minutes before I woke to the knocking, the dragging started again. Back the other way. Living room to kitchen. Then a door. Not the front door. The internal stairwell door at the back of the kitchen. Opening, then closing. Something was using the building's back stairwell. Every night. Always at 1:58. Always after the route was finished. I didn't go upstairs. I had audio evidence of something entering and leaving an empty apartment through an internal stairwell door. Weeks of escalating sounds. A neighbor who had vanished without explanation. And I sat in my apartment and waited for morning. Police non-emergency line at 8 a.m. Patient officer. Welfare check already conducted. No crime, no harm. Adults could leave. Old buildings made noise. I emailed the audio file. He replied 3 hours later. Received and noted. I never heard from him again. That evening, chair under the door handle. Old habit. My hands did it before my brain decided it was necessary. 9:47, the dragging started. Same route, but slower, as if it had more time, as if it had stopped pretending to be in a hurry. Living room position. Pause. Then it continued, past the position where it always stopped. Further, to a part of the apartment directly above my bedroom. New territory. The single knock landed 6 inches above my head. Then silence. At 1:58 a.m., the stairwell door opened above me and closed. At 2:04, footsteps came down one floor and stopped outside mine. I watched the gap under my door. The hallway light was unbroken for 10 seconds, then a shadow, 2 feet, moving slowly to my door. Stopping. It stood there. I counted. 4 minutes. Not shifting, not moving. Then back to the stairwell, ascending. The door above me opened and closed at 2:09. I did not move until morning. I went upstairs the next morning. Not to confront anything, because not going had started to feel like the problem. Like the space above me had grown larger in my imagination than any physical room could justify. 4th floor, empty hallway, 4C. Same door as always. Number plate, peephole, doormat back in position. I knocked. Nothing. Hand flat against the door. Cool. No vibration. I crouched and looked through the gap at the bottom. Darkness. Then, a strip of light. Not daylight. The apartment faced north. No morning sun reached the kitchen until afternoon. Yellow light. Warm. The specific color of an incandescent bulb left on in a closed room. Someone had turned a light on inside a vacant apartment. I stood up slowly. 8:23 a.m. I stood in that hallway for 2 full minutes. Then I heard it. From inside. Not the dragging, not the knocking. The creak of weight settling onto a bed frame. The sound Mrs. Aldric made every night at 9:58. At 8:23 in the morning, in an apartment confirmed empty, I walked back downstairs. In my kitchen, I stood at the table and thought about her reading glasses, folded on the table beside the half-finished tea. The ring the cup had left on the wood. You leave a cup that way when you plan to come back, not when you leave permanently, when you step away for a moment. I thought about that for a long time before I understood why it bothered me more than the sounds. I called Mrs. Aldric's daughter 2 days later. Emergency contact list inside the lobby notice board. Old paper. Previous manager's handwriting. Her daughter's name was Ingrid, 3 hours away. She answered on the second ring. I introduced myself. Downstairs neighbor, hadn't seen her mother in some time, wanted to make sure she was well. Long pause. She passed away, Ingrid said. 6 weeks ago. In the apartment. Found after 3 days. I thought the building had been notified. 6 weeks. The footsteps had continued for 3 weeks after that. I stood in my kitchen and did the arithmetic. 3 weeks of 9:47. 3 weeks of 9:52. 3 weeks of 9:58 and the creak of the bed frame. All of it exactly as always. For 3 weeks after she was gone. "She's buried now," Ingrid said. Flat voice. The voice of someone finished with grief and now just carrying the fact forward. "I've been meaning to clear the apartment. Haven't managed it yet." I said I was sorry. I said there was no rush. I did not tell her about the sounds. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table until the room got dark. 6 weeks ago, she died. 3 weeks of her routine continued exactly as always. Then something changed it. The sounds didn't stop when she died. They evolved, like something had been watching, taking notes, learning the route. And then, once the original was gone, beginning to practice, getting a little closer each night to something it was trying to replicate, but not quite there yet. I started sleeping on the couch. From there, I could see the gap under my front door, the thin strip of hallway light. Anything moving outside, I'd see the shadow first. 3 nights, nothing. 4th night, I woke at 1:52 and lay watching the door. 1:58 a.m., stairwell door above me. Open, close, silence. 2:04, footsteps on the stairs outside my floor, descending, slow. The specific placement of someone who knew which steps creaked and was avoiding them deliberately. They stopped at my floor. I watched the gap under the door. Hallway light unbroken. 10 seconds. Then the shadow. 2 feet, moving to my door, stopping directly outside it. I didn't breathe. It didn't move. Didn't shift weight. Didn't adjust. Just stood there in the complete silence of a building at 2 a.m., 4 minutes without any movement at all. I timed it. 4 minutes exactly. Then back to the stairwell, ascending, door above me at 2:09. The next evening, I set a camera in the hallway, motion triggered, angled at my door. Morning, footage from 2:04 to 2:09. I played it back. The hallway was empty the entire time. No figure, no shadow, nothing. But in the audio beneath the empty hallway footage, clearly at the exact timestamps I had counted, the sound of breathing right outside my door. Slow, even, patient. I went to the building archive. The manager kept paper records in a filing cabinet in the basement. He let me look. "Personal research," I said. Close enough to true. Tenant records for apartment 4C. Mrs. Aldric, moved in 1987. 36 years. Longest tenure in the building by a significant margin. Before her, Vera Holst, 1962 to 1986, 24 years. Before Vera Holst, a name I couldn't read clearly in the older handwriting. 1949 to 1961, 12 years. 3 women, 3 long tenures in the same apartment. I went back upstairs. I stood in my apartment and looked at the ceiling. 36 years of 947. Mrs. Aldric's route, worn into the parquet above me by thousands of evenings. Kitchen to living room to bathroom, bathroom to bedroom. Before that, 24 years of Vera Holst's routine, whatever her route was, whatever time she walked it, pressed into the same floors. And before that, 12 years of whoever came first. I thought about what wood remembers, what old parquet holds after decades of the same pressure, the same path, the same weight settling into the same boards at the same hour. I thought about the dragging sound, too heavy for slippers, as if more than one routine was being completed at once. That evening at 9:47, the dragging started. I stood beneath it and counted. Not one pause before the living room position. 3. 3 distinct stops. 3 slightly different weights. 3 rhythms layered over each other. There had always been 1 pause. Now, there were 3. I moved out 2 weeks later. I packed what fit in my car over 3 evenings, put the rest in storage, handed in my notice. Told my landlord nothing specific beyond a change in circumstances. Last night in the apartment, stripped down, just me and the walls. 9:47, the dragging, 3 pauses, the living room stop, silence. I had almost stopped being afraid of it. Almost. The way you stop being afraid of weather. Midnight. Last box to the car. Hallway empty. Elevator humming below. Street quiet and cold. I stood beside the car and looked up at the building. 4C was dark. Then the kitchen light came on. Warm yellow. Incandescent. A shape moved behind the glass. Not a silhouette. A density. Darkness within darkness. Moving from one side of the window to the other at the pace of someone walking between rooms. Then a second shape, behind the first. Same route, slightly different pace. Then a third. All 3 crossing the kitchen toward the living room. 3 densities, 3 paces. The same route walked slightly differently by each. I got in the car. I have not been back, but I still hear it sometimes. New apartment. Silence before sleep. The slow drag of something crossing a room that should be empty. I think about the person who moved into 3C after me. I should have left a note. About 9:47, about the 3 pauses, about the fact that it keeps accumulating, because Mrs. Aldric was the 3rd tenant in that apartment, and now there are 3 shapes in the window. And the building has been standing since 1949, which means somewhere in that archive, before the name I couldn't read, there were more.